Hello everyone, my name is Monit Kachawa, founder and CEO of EduXide Classes. In today's class, we will solve paper 2 of physics, November series 2019. Okay, so without wasting time, let us start. Okay, this is my humble request to one and all. If you are watching this video, please attempt this paper before watching this video. Okay, so please go through once and then please watch this video. You can pause it now, and if you want to solve with me, just go through each and every question, try the questions and then see the solutions. Okay, yeah. Question number 1. The graph shows the variation with time t of the horizontal force F extended on a tennis ball by a racket. So here you can see here, with respect to time, the force versus time graph is given to us, and the peak is obtained at 20 millisecond after the ball is in contact with the racket. A tennis ball was stationary at the instant when it was hit. Initially we are assuming that the ball, when it hits the racket, the ball was initially at rest. The mass of the tennis ball is given to us. The area under the curve, this is the area which is 0.84 Newton second. Now in the first part, calculate the speed of the ball as it leaves the racket. So as soon as the ball leaves the racket, we have to find out the speed. So we know that change in momentum is the area under the force versus time graph. The force versus time graphs gives us the change in momentum, because we know that force is equals to delta P over delta T. So F times delta T will be the change in momentum. Okay, so change in momentum is given to us. So area under the curve is 0.84 and change in momentum is final momentum minus initial momentum. Final momentum, mass in times final velocity, initial momentum, mass times initial velocity. As the ball is initially at rest, therefore we have taken it 0. Solving for V, we get the answer 14.48, rounding off to 3 significant figure, 14.5 meter per second. Now the B part, F average. Show that the average force exerted on the ball by the racket is 50 Newton. So find out the average force. We know change in momentum over time. Change in momentum is given to us. Change in time that we can identify by using the graph. So if you look at the closer, point, it is just starting below this point. So this is 10, 11, 12. So we can consider at 12 millisecond the ball comes in contact with the racket, and when it leaves, this is 25, 26, 27, 28. So 28, because you can see there is a slight slope on the here. So we have taken 28 when it leaves and 12 when it in contact. So that is the time period in which the ball is in contact with the racket. So we have calculated 16 into 10 raised to power minus 3 second. So F average comes out to be 50 Newton. Okay, using this value. Now the C part, determine with reference to the work done by the average for the horizontal distance travelled by the ball when it was in contact with the racket. So we have to identify the average work done, the horizontal distance travelled by the ball when it is in contact with the racket. So we know that the work done by the average force is gain in kinetic energy of the ball. So F times D will be equals to half mv square, that is the work done will be equals to the kinetic energy gain. So F average times D, that D we have to identify, mass we know, velocity we have already calculated, F average we have already calculated. Putting up the values, you will get D as 0.116 meter, rounding off to 2 significant figure, 0.12 meter. Please round off into a suitable significant figure for answering. Okay. Now the D part, draw a graph to show the variation with t to the horizontal speed v of the ball while it was in contact with the racket. So here numbers are not required, it is mentioned here. Okay, so velocity versus time graph. So when the ball is in contact with the racket, initially the acceleration will increase when it will hit. So in increasing acceleration, we have a concave shape. At this point, it is at the maximum contact, so the acceleration will increase maximum, or you can say the velocity will be the change in velocity will be maximum. So and after, when it is about to leave the racket, then there will be a decreasing acceleration, then there will be a convex shape curve. So you have to draw like this. The numbers are not required. Okay. So 1 mark you can say for increasing acceleration, 1 mark for decreasing and correct shape. I hope the question 1 is clear to you. If you have any doubt regarding any part of any of the question, you can comment below. I will try to reply as soon as possible. Okay. Now the question number 2. The air in a kitchen has pressure and temperature given to us. A refrigerator of internal volume is given, which is installed in the kitchen. In the A part, with the door open, the air in the refrigerator is initially at the same temperature and pressure as air in the kitchen. So initially when the door is open of the refrigerator, then we can consider that the temperature, initial temperature is same and the pressure is same as it is in the kitchen. Calculate the number of molecules of air in the refrigerator. So we have to calculate the number of molecules of air which is within the refrigerator. So considering the ideal gas equation, PV equals to nRT, where n is the number of moles. So n can be written as number of molecules over Avogadro number. So this is already mentioned here, and we know that Boltzmann constant K is nothing but the gas constant divided by Avogadro number, whose value is already mentioned here. These all datas are given in your physics data booklet. You can refer these datas there also. So using this, so R upon Na becomes K, and N what is we are supposed to find out. Pressure is given, temperature is given, volume is given. Putting up all the values, Boltzmann constant is given. So you will get 8.84 into 10 raised to power 24, which rounding off into two significant figure, 8.8 into 10 raised to power 24 number of molecules are present in the refrigerator of number of molecules of the air. Okay. Now the B part, the refrigerator door is now closed. We have closed the refrigerator door. Now the air in the refrigerator is cooled to 5 degrees centigrade, and the number of molecules in the refrigerator stays the same. It is given that now we have closed the door and the temperature are now reduced to 5 degrees centigrade. Also the number of molecules in the refrigerator remains the same that we have calculated above. Now the first part is determine the pressure of the air inside the refrigerator. Now what will be the pressure of the air, because as the now door is closed, there will be some pressure exerted of the air inside the refrigerator. So here we can consider one thing, that the volume of the refrigerator will remain same and the number of molecules also stays same. So PV equals to nRT. So V and R we can consider it as same. So P by T will remain constant. So that is what I have written here. Pressure is 1 into 10 raised to power 5. That is the initial. Now we are considering the when the door was opened and when the door was closed. So the ratio of P by T will remain same because other factors are same. So I have taken, you can say P1 T1 equals to P2 T2. This is when the door is closed. This is when the door is open. Okay. So using this, please convert the temperatures into Kelvin that we have already considered here. So pressure comes out to be 9.4 into 10 raised to power 4 Pascal. Now the second part, it is given that the refrigerator has an area of, the door of that refrigerator has area 0.72 meters square. Show that the minimum force needed to open the refrigerator is 4 kilonewton. We have to show this. Now here one important point you have to note it down, that while using the formula for the pressure as pressure equals to force per unit area. So here that will be the change in, that is the difference in the pressure, not change, that is the difference in the pressure for which you are considering. So here the door, so we can say the pressure inside the door and pressure outside the door. Outside the door will be the atmospheric pressure and pressure inside the door that we have calculated above. So the change in pressure will be equals to force upon air, because that amount of force you will require to open the door. So change in pressure is atmospheric pressure minus pressure inside the refrigerator. We have both the values, that is 1 into 10 raised to power 5 and 9.4 into 10 raised to power 4. And area is already given. Putting up the values, Rounding it off, it comes out to be 4 kilonewton, which is a very high value. That is why the third part is comment on the magnitude of the force. Now, if you say 4 kilonewton, it is a very high magnitude for a given force. If you want to open a door, you have to apply a 4 kilonewton, which is unrealistic. So there might be an assumption, because we know that the ideal gas equation which we are using in this part is an ideal case. In practical, there is a shift from an ideal gas equation. So that is why the force comes out to be very large, and the assumption used to calculate pressure or force is unrealistic, as all gases deviate from ideal gas law or equation that we have used here. So 2 marks is, one you have to mention that the force is very large, and 1 marks for the why it is unrealistic. Okay. I hope question number 2 is clear to all. Now the question number 3. A solid line in the graph shows the variation with distance x of the displacement y traveling at t equals to 0, starting with 0. The dotted line, you can see here the dotted line of the wave shows 0.2 millisecond later. The period of the wave is longer than 0.2 millisecond. Calculate in meter per second the speed of this wave. So we can consider any two adjacent point, that will be the distance covered and the time difference that we will use here. So you can consider what, if you consider any 2 points, let us say these 2 points. So you can consider this is 0.2, so this will be one division. If you say this will be 0.1, this will be 0.02, so one division will be 0.02. So if we say this is the difference, so you can see here it will be starting with and this, so this distance will be comes out to be 0.02, 0.04, 0.05 around. Okay, roughly it is 0.05, so distance is 0.05, and the difference between these two waves is given in the question. This is 0.2 millisecond. So converting into SI unit, that is second, you got the speed using the formula distance per unit time. So distance is 0.05, time is 20 millisecond. So the speed of this wave comes out to be 250 meter per second. Okay. Now the frequency of this wave, using the wave equation V equals to F lambda. V is already known to us. Frequency is given, or you can find it out, that is using the frequency we have to find it out. Lambda we can calculate here. You can see adjacent crest, adjacent trough, or any adjacent 2 points on the wave. So I consider from here to here. So if you see here, this will be 0.3, this is 0.3, so 0 to 0.3 is the lambda. So using this, 250 upon 0.3 comes out to be 833.3 hertz, which is 833 hertz rounding off, or sorry, into two significant figure, 830 hertz. So how to decide in how many significant figure we have to answer? Look at the values given in the question. So if you see, there are two significant figures values, so you have to answer in 2 SF. That is the way. So 1 mark for this, 1 mark for final answer. Now the B part. The graph also shows the displacement of two particles P and Q in the medium at t equals to 0. State and explain which particle has larger magnitude of acceleration at t equals to 0. Now you can see here, this is a wave nature and the particles are on P and Q. If you see here, P and Q. So at t equals to 0, P is at this point, the displacement is 0, and Q is having a maximum, this is the displacement. So at t equals to 0, Q is at this point, that is at the maximum displacement, and we know a relation between acceleration and displacement, that acceleration is directly proportional to the displacement. Okay, so acceleration is directly proportional to displacement, therefore Q is at maximum displacement, so Q has larger displacement, so the Q will have more acceleration as at t equals to 0. So you have to first of all state, that is 1 mark for Q, and stating that Q has larger magnitude, and explanation, that is directly proportional to displacement and Q's displacement is larger than P. Now coming to the standing wave part, a one end of the string you can see is attached to an oscillator and the other end is fixed. When the frequency of the oscillator is 360 Hz, the standing wave is shown. The point X not shown in is a point on the string at a distance of 10 cm from the oscillator. State the number of all the points on a string that have same amplitude and phase as X. Now we know that if in the given here 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 4 nodes are forming. So if a point is away from X, which is 10 cm, it can be anywhere. So this point and this point. These 3 points will be having same amplitude and having the same phase. Okay, so there are 3 points. The frequency of the oscillator is reduced to 120 Hz. The initial frequency was 360 Hz. Now it has been reduced to 120 Hz. It means that it comes to 1/3. So the wavelength will also increase by 3 times. So here 3 wavelengths are forming. Here it will be only 1, that is this type of wavelength we have to draw. This is the dash, so this shows a standing wave. Okay. Okay, now question number 4. A proton is moving in a region of uniform magnetic field. The magnetic field is directed into the plane of the paper. So the magnetic field is going inside the paper. The arrow shows the velocity. This is the velocity shown at one instant. The dotted circle given the path. This is the path traveled by this proton. Explain why the path of the proton is a circle. So it's an easy one. Just use the right hand rule that to define the direction of the motion of an charged particle moving in a uniform magnetic field. So what is that rule says? Use your right hand in such a way that the fingers will be pointing in the direction of magnetic field. So the magnetic field are going inside the paper. So I am putting my magnetic field inside the paper. Thumb will point towards the direction of the motion of the particle. The particle is moving like this. It is tangential in direction. So you can see my hand. The magnetic field are going downward. Proton is moving in this direction. So the palm will show the direction of the force exerted on the charged particle. So you can see here the proton, the force is coming towards the center. Also when you move in this direction, then again here, here. So it will, all the forces will be towards the center. So that is why it is moving in a circular motion, that is a centripetal force. The force acting on the proton is towards the center by using right hand rule, where I have explained what do we mean by right hand rule as of now. Okay, so 2 marks. One is mentioning that it is acting towards the center and why, how you came to this conclusion by using the right hand rule. Now the B part. The speed of the proton is given, the magnetic field strength is also mentioned. Find the radius of the path of the proton. Now using that, we know that the force which is acting towards the center is the centripetal force. So we equate the centripetal force with the force exerted on a charged particle in a uniform magnetic field, that is q times velocity times magnetic field. So mv square by r is equals to qvb. Q is the charge of proton, 1.67 into 10 raised to the power minus 27. No, that is the mass of proton. So R will be equals to mv by qb, because one v will get cancelled out. So mv will be equals to mv upon qb will be equals to r. So mass is 1.67, v is given to us, q is 1.6 into 10 raised to the power minus 19, b is also given to us. These data, mass of proton, charge of proton, these all data are mentioned in the data booklet given to you. Okay, so using this you will find that it comes out to be 0.059 meter, because all the values are SI units. So radius will come out to be in meter, converting it into centimeter, and it comes out to be approx 6 centimeter, is about 6 centimeter. Okay, fine. Now the second part, calculate the time for one complete revolution. So we know that in one complete revolution the charged particle will cover a distance of 2 pi r, that is the circumference. R we have already calculated, but just put it in meters. Time period we have to calculate, velocity we have already given. So it comes out to be into SF 1.9 into 10 raised to power minus 7 second. Now explain why the kinetic of the proton is constant. So we know that the kinetic energy of the particle is depending upon the mass and velocity. Mass of the proton will remain same. Now coming to the velocity. Now we know that as the proton is moving with a constant speed, it is mentioned here. This is the uniform magnetic field, the velocity, so nothing is varying here, so the velocity will remain same. Okay, so if velocity is same, mass is same, then definitely kinetic energy will also remain same. I hope question number 4 is clear. If you have any doubt at any instant, you can just comment below. Okay, now question number 5. An electron is placed at a distance of 0.4 meter from a fixed point charge of minus 6 millicoulomb. Show that the electric field strength due to the point charge at the position of electron is this. So we know the formula of electric field, that is kq by r square. So k is 8.9, this is also mentioned. Q is the charge of the point charge that we have to consider. So we are finding out the electric field due to that point charge, so we will use the charge of point charge, that is 6 millicoulomb, that we consider the magnitude only, and the distance is 0.4, so you will get 3.37 into 10 raised to power 8 Newton per coulomb. Now the B part, calculate the magnitude of the initial acceleration of the electron. Now we know that the force exerted is equals to F equals to QE, that will be equals to the mass times acceleration. So using this relation, E we have already find it out, Q we know, mass of electron we already know, 9.1 into 10 raised to power minus 31. These all data are given, the charge, the mass of electron, proton, this is already given in your data booklet, no need to worry. So acceleration into SF comes out to be 5.9 into 10 raised to power 19 meter per second square. Do not forget to mention the units, it's play a very important role. Now the second part, describe the subsequent motion of the electron. Look, now how the electron will move. We know that this is a negative charge particle here, this is electron and this is a negative charge Q. So we know that electron, there will be a repulsion, so electron will move away from the point charge, and as soon as it is moving away, the field becomes loosened, so the force will also decrease, resulting in decrease in acceleration. So electron will move away from the point charge with decreasing acceleration, but speed will increase. This is very important. Decreasing acceleration and increasing speed. Decreasing acceleration doesn't mean that speed will decrease at that same instant. The speed will increase but at a slower rate. Decreasing acceleration means speed will increase at a slower rate, but still it will get increase. Okay, because as acceleration is acting, acceleration is acting, but the rate of acceleration is decreasing. Speed will increase at a slower rate, but it will said to be as increasing speed. Okay, so that is why you can see here it is of 3 marks. So 1 marks that the direction, and 1 mark how it will move. So decreasing acceleration and increasing speed, these consist of 1 mark each. Okay, so question number 5, I hope it is clear. Now the question number 6. A wind is incident on the blade of a wind turbine. The radius of the blade is 12 meter. The following data are given before and after the impact with the blades. So the density of air before it impacts with the wind turbine is this, after this. The speed of wind before is given and after is given. Now in the A part, find the maximum power that can be extracted from the wind by this turbine. Now one formula is there in your data booklet, that is power is equals to 1 by 2 times area of cross section with which the wind is exerting, density times velocity Q. So many of you have either you can use this formula directly, but how this formula comes into existence, here I have shown. The power is energy per unit time, so I am calculating power per unit second, that is the energy dissipated per unit second. So here the energy of the wind will be kinetic energy. So half mv square upon 1 is the 1 second. Now mass can be written as density times volume. So density and volume can be written as, for 1 second, how much volume of air has been exerted on the blades. So volume will be area of cross section times velocity for 1 second. Velocity is meter per second and area of cross section. So area of cross section into velocity will be the volume for 1 second. So area into velocity times velocity square. So it comes out to be this formula. D is the density of the air. So maximum power extracted can be written as the power input, how much power input has been given and how much power output it is coming out. So that will be the maximum power extracted from the wind. Okay. So using this formula for both out, before and after, that is the power out is after 1.32 pi r square will be the area of cross section, because blades are moving in a circular motion. So radius of the blade is given to us. So the area of cross section will be pi r square times velocity after. So it comes out to be this much amount of power is the output we are getting after the impact of the wind from the wind turbine. So power in is using these data, then subtracting it, we got 1.2 into 10 raised to power 5 watt. Okay, I hope it is clear to you. Now suggest why the answer A is a maximum. Now this is a maximum power because we have not considered any losses during the conversion, before the impact and after the impact, and we know that there is no such machinery which is 100% efficient. There is some sort of energy loses to the surrounding in any of the conversion of energy. So because we have not considered losses, as some energy will be lost to the surroundings. Now the question number 7. The radioactive decay is said to be random and spontaneous. Outline what is meant by each of these terms. So the random is, we know that the decay process is a random process. It cannot be predicted when a nucleus will decay. I cannot say now it will decay or after 5 seconds it will decay. It is a random process. It will decay any instant on its own. And spontaneous also, it cannot be controlled or influenced. I cannot control that now I want alpha decay, now I want beta decay or a gamma. Okay, so it cannot be controlled or influenced in any of the way, and that is why the radioactive process is a random and spontaneous process. Now a stationary nucleus of uranium-238 undergoes alpha decay to form thorium-234. The following data are given. Calculate the binding energy per nuclear for uranium-238. Now look, to find out the binding energy per nucleon, first of all you have to understand this, that the energy released in the decay is equal to the total binding energy, total final binding energy minus initial binding energy. So this data are given per nucleon, so we have to multiply it for the total with the number of nucleons. So the binding energy of uranium-238, that is the initial case, will be equals to total final binding energy minus energy released in decay. The most of you will, what you will do is you will get that will not be added. The reason being, the energy in, this is the formula for the energy in release in decay, because the final initial binding energy is lower than the final binding energy, because the energy has to be released. You know the Einstein mass energy equation, delta that one delta m c square. So the mass is the different in the mass is converting into the energy. So you cannot apply the conservation of energy directly here, although it has been applied, but in different sense, that mass and energy are interrelated here. So this is the formula that you have to remember. So that is why it is being subtracted. Many of the students have doubt why it is get subtracted. So I hope your doubt is clear. I repeat once again, the energy released in the decay will always be equal to total final binding energy minus initial binding energy. So on the reactant side, the binding energy will be lower than the binding energy from the product side, because there is a energy released during a decay. So for uranium-238, 234.7.6, that is the per nucleon for thorium, plus 4 is the number of nucleon in alpha times 7.07, all are in mega electron volt, minus 4.27, so it comes out to be 1802.41 mega electron volt. That is the total binding energy. For per nucleon you have to divide it by 238, that is the number of nucleon in uranium. So you will get per nucleon as 7.57 mega electron volt. Okay. Now the second part, calculate the ratio kinetic energy of the alpha particle to the kinetic energy of thorium nucleus. So here it is very important that either you can directly use this relation, but once you are supposed to remember one thing is the momentum for the thorium and the alpha particle will be same. In order to apply the conservation of momentum, which says that the momentum before the collision must be equal to the momentum after the collision. So we know that the uranium 238 is stationary, so the momentum before the decay, or you can say before the nucleus decay, is 0. So to momentum to become 0 for the after the decay, the thorium and the alpha particles should have the same momentum but in opposite direction, so they get cancelled out. So this is what I have mentioned here. Applying the conservation of momentum before collision must be equal to after collision. The nucleus is stationary, so momentum before collision is 0. Therefore alpha particle and thorium nucleus must move with same momentum but in opposite direction. So that is why using this ratio p square, this is also the formula given in your data booklet. So p square and p square get cancelled, 2 and 2 get cancelled, so mass of thorium upon mass of alpha particle, that is 234 divided by 4, 58.5 is the ratio. Okay, I hope I have cleared this doubt. So this is all about in today's video, where we have solved from question number 1 to question number 7 for the both HL and SL. The questions are common for question number 1 to question number 7. So the SL and HL both have the same questions that we have discussed in this video. The question number 8 to question number 11, that is only for the HL students, that we will discuss in the next video. Okay. So if you want to join my online tutoring classes, which is also available for math, physics, and I have also teachers for chemistry and bio for all Edexcel, IBDP, IB, MYP, Cambridge, AQ and OCR. So you can contact, the details are also given in the comment in the below description. You can comment or you can directly visit to my website. You can have a 40 minutes free trial lesson where we can discuss how the classes will be going on. We can have a short demo type. As per your topic, you are supposed to fill out a form. Based on that form, the class will be scheduled and we can talk further. Okay. So this is all about me. You can also refer to for more details to my website. The link and the already all is given in the description. You can check. So what are the online classes highlights? You can get the same PDF of this video on my website also. Okay. So high quality PDF notes and notes of this video, yes, on you can get it by free on my website. There all my videos notes are available on my website. There will be full curriculum covered. You will get study material as well. There will be one-to-one support and smart online session, which I will generally using all my educating tools and simulations. So you can contact on my WhatsApp number. Just feel free to contact. Okay. Thank you. Have a great